what would be the thing that you would have advised your younger self?
So I would say to people, whatever you're doing right now, you should be pouring all of yourself into that to be the absolute pinnacle of excellence around you to inspire others, but also that is a training ground for where you may be called later on in life, whatever it might be. But each job I had, I didn't see it at the time I was in it, but it's so clear to me now with hindsight.
But I refuse to stay in a victim mentality. I gotta stand and fight for my honor and my family. That's how I did it, cause you know that's how it had to be. So now I'm slaying dragons and I do it happily. I told them I refuse to be another casualty. I looked inside the dragon's eyes and then I told them casually, hi, I'm a dragon slayer and I got a dragon lair. I'ma go and slay a dragon, then I'm gonna drag him there. I don't care, I ain't scared. Look inside my heart and there's a lion there, conquering my dragon.
So Mark, here's a question for you. If you had to look back at the 20-year-old you and sit down, okay, and say, hey, if I would have known then what I know now, what would you be telling the 20-year-old you so that he could have sped the process up? And to go back and to say, you know, you could have been more effective in that regard, what would be the thing that you would have advised your younger self?
3 things I would say to that. First off, when I got down here, I knew I was being called to come here, but I really didn't understand it. It was like, I loved what I was doing in Denver. Like, why come here? But 2 weeks after I got here, it was so clear to me, God had been preparing me my whole life. All the jobs I did in the secular world, and then with Lighthouse, and then with Augusta Institute, all of that was preparatory for what I'm doing today. And so I would say to people, whatever you're doing right now, you should be pouring all of yourself into that to be the absolute pinnacle of excellence around you to inspire others, but also because that is a training ground for what God, where you may be called later on in life to do. You know, and maybe it's a merger, maybe it's an acquisition, maybe it's to do a takeover of some other company to reestablish them, you know, whatever it might be. But I think that's the first thing is, each job I had, I didn't see it at the time I was in it, but it's so clear to me now with hindsight. The second piece is, I think it was Jordan Peterson in a podcast I was listening to from him that said 85% of billionaires in the United States did not inherit it. They're all self-made in a sense. And what was one common thing they all did? They all read a book a week. And I would say for me, that constant learning, and not just learning for the sake of learning, but learning then trying to put it into action and making sure you're getting great books that will help you along that way. And there's so many incredible books out there. So I would say that's the second thing. And, you know, from a third item, for me personally, and this is probably going to be hard for people to understand if they're not in the kind of work that I'm doing, his name was Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He had the largest TV program called Life is Worth Living. I think he had 32% market share in the secular world.
Yeah, he was primetime, and
right.
It was didn't he win a bunch of I don't even know
an Emmy
Emmys
award and things like that? But anyway,
yeah,
he never missed it a single day in his life. It was called the Daily Holy Hour, and it was spending time in front of what we call the Blessed Sacrament and adoration every day. And so for me, if I could do one thing different, I do that today. I spend an hour every day, and sometimes you have to get up really early to make sure you don't miss.
And if somebody doesn't understand what that means because they're not Catholic, it would be a direct prayer with God.
Yeah.
Would be a way to understand it.
And so that is one thing that I would say. And it's kind of weird talking about it, but I would say also what we call, it's another thing that's way out there, but if they Google, because there's a lot of things people misunderstand it to represent, but it's called Marian consecration. So a lot of your listeners are familiar with Pope John Paul II. You know, he's obviously a very world figure and famous person. When he was asked, what was the difference maker in your life? You would think he might say, well, when I became a priest. No. When I became a bishop? No. When I became a cardinal? No. When I became the Pope? No. He said the change in his life, the most important thing he ever did in his life that started was when he made his Marian consecration. So, and that was before all those other things. So for me, it would be those two things. If I had started those much earlier, you know, I didn't even know what those things really were, I would say, when I was in college and things. I had heard of them, of course, but never done them.
When you think about that sort of thing, most people are kind of afraid to answer a question like that. They're afraid to integrate the way faith has impacted their life, so they give kind of a sanitized answer, even if they believe it, because it's you have to be courageous to do that sort of thing. Or what they do is they talk around it in ways that they don't realize that they could have gone there quicker. So, for example, when I have leaders on the show of any background, of any faith background or no faith at all, they are all gonna talk. If they're highly successful, we talk about the same thing. And I mention this a lot. I don't mind repping things out. The person who's sitting around at 1 o'clock in the morning watching Shark Tank with a beer and a bag of chips saying, "Oh, that was my idea," but never did it. And the difference between that person and the person on the show is many things, but oftentimes it is virtue, especially when you see long-term success, and that they were willing to take action on their decisions. Okay, they're first of all willing to make a decision, then take action on it. They had the fortitude to get through it, to actually make it happen. So what happens is when people have had high levels of success or been in effective levels of leadership, and you get to there and you talk, well, what made it happen? There's an enormous amount of time on culture. Like you said, trust, organizational health, all of these sorts of things. It's not talking about people like the individual. Let me tell you about Bob and his problems from an accounting. But it's about the way to form the person. I mean, this is where we spend most of the time, because all things being equal, an apostolate or a Catholic university has access to everything everybody else has. You have access to all the professors, but you find certain ones that they don't. You have access to starting a major, but you do something that they don't. All of these different things. Why is that? Ultimately speaking, it's because of the way you form the people in the organization. But people are watching Shark Tank. They think that the answer would have been technology or a new iPhone or a better logo. And that's what they spend their time thinking about, not these big, higher things. Like, I mean, how about this to your answer? What would you have said? You said, do whatever you're doing to the best of your ability, because it's going to lead to something greater later on. You're going to use that experience for something later. Then you said, read a ton. And then you emphasized 2 intense portions of your faith. And those things are all about shaping and forming the person so you can shape and form other people. That's a huge, huge takeaway. And a lot of people miss that. I guess a couple other questions that I would have for you is, if you were talking to a person who's brand new as an entrepreneur, they're going to start a business and they're considering taking the leap. Let's say they're a person of faith or not. Okay. But they're trying to make a prudential decision about leaving their organization to go into something else. And there are other people that are in their care and responsibility. How would you help them, guide them through that?
Never give up, never quit.
Okay. Yeah.
It is, and there are going to be so many obstacles in front of you, but to stay focused on the core, if you will, on your strategic anchors. And you can't have 10 strategic anchors. Really, I think to succeed, it's interesting. Patrick Lencioni, there's a quote in the book where he says, organizational health will one day surpass all other disciplines in business as the greatest opportunity for improvement and competitive advantage. So if you have a team of people, you may have some of those people already working for you that can really help bring the organization to a different level, but they've never been empowered.
So you're famous for this in Lighthouse. Hey, Mark, I've got a great idea. I think we should, and you know what your answer is every time.
You help me do it. You do it.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Why don't you own that?
Right.
Great idea. Go do it. But talk about building a great culture. I mean, that gets people to say, hey, I'm going to go to Mark and I'm going to say we should do this. And unless it's some sort of whacked out idea that he knows is going to fail, he's going to look at me and he's going to say, I think we should. Why don't you do it? And you're going to give somebody power and authority and the resources to get something done when it's a good idea. And I watched it time and time and time again. You made very fast decisions in ways that most people did not make quick decisions. And one of the ways that you're in the presence of a person with prudence is that they can measure the speed of the decision to the weight of the issue. But even on weighty issues, because they practice decision making on a regular basis, they can come up with a decision that most people would have had 3 committee meetings on, 4 different finance meetings on, and you were like within 15 minutes going, great idea, let's do it. Watch it over and over again. What would you say to people about that? The ability to combine making great decisions and empowering people that way?
As far as for us, speed to market was very important. And first to market was very important. And it really is, capturing the market share as quickly as you can. And if you're going to fail fast, as that saying goes, And even when I look at certain individuals like Tom Monahan, who, my gosh, I've never met anybody that has had more obstacles put in front of him, but yet he stuck to it. He persevered, really, despite all the odds, when a lot of people would have just said give up or sell it and be done with it, So I think, and then getting people around you that embrace that kind of mindset as well. I think, Dave, one of the things I loved working with you was you yourself were already doing that across different businesses and how you manage things. And then other people we partner with, even like in the case with Tom Monahan, Tom built the first Catholic radio station in the country.
Yeah.
A group called Legatus, which is comprised of, I think, about 3,000 business entrepreneurs, so like your audience, and they recognize that their tie between their success and that faith. Some of these things didn't exist, and yet just perseverance. And Tom would say, I may not have been the, and I think he's brilliant, by the way. So when he says this, I don't believe it really. He says, I may not have been the smartest guy in the room, but nobody was going to outwork me.
How old is he now?
He'll be 87 on March 25th.
And he still, I think, can do 100 push-ups.
Oh, yeah. He is unbelievable. I've never met a more disciplined person than him.
Yeah, he's incredibly disciplined. I think one of the major differences between people who perform and people who don't is it's just taking the action. See, a lot of people, it's on ideas, okay, when you talk about never give up and taking action on things, I think people, they get confused about that. And what happens is they have a very bad idea that they never give up on. That's a bad idea. If it's a bad idea, you need to give up on it. So there's this relationship between fortitude and temperance, right? And prudence. We even talked about justice in there. These are the cardinal virtues that I talk about all the time. And that prudence is that ability to identify the right decision. It's to have right reason according to a circumstance and then to act upon it. And then that fortitude is the thing that gets you to continue with that thing and to not quit. But if you have fortitude based on a bad decision, you don't really have fortitude. You have craziness. I mean, you really do. Like if you're committed to a bad idea, that's crazy. So, but what happens is for most people that are entrepreneurs is their idea is unrefined and it's a decent idea. It's a moderately good idea, in which case they start moving in a certain direction, but that prudence, fueled by the fortitude allows them to pivot, constantly make changes and say, oh, this seemed like it was working, but let's go over there. I mean, you started out with cassette tapes when you started Lighthouse Catholic Media, and you moved to CDs. And then from CDs, you needed to move to digital products. And knowing what is the timing for this and seeing it ahead of time and being ahead of the curve.